Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Picking Up Rubber. I am your host, Justin Russo, and today we are going to preview round 10 of the 2022 Formula One World Championship, the British Grand Prix from Silverstone, a historic circuit, always a fun race, brings out the best in the cars in qualifying on Saturday, the race on Sunday, a lot of huge upgrades coming for a lot of teams as well. So ready to jump into that. I also want to say I am going to talk a little bit at the end of this about a lot of the racial issues going on in F1 recently between Yuri Vips, Nelson Piquet, and Lewis Hamilton. It's too important not to talk about, especially in this day and age, and so I definitely want to touch on that. I'll save that for the end. Well, let's get into the preview first. Let's jump into the race. Exciting race. First of back-to-back races here in F1. Next week, we're going to be in Austria, so that'll be fun on the weekend of July 10th. But we're here at Silverstone now, coming off of a 2-week break from Canada, where Max Verstappen took his 6th win of the season, looking in peak form at the moment, but I think Ferrari can finally come back at him here. There's a lot of upgrades to go through, a lot of things each team's bringing, so let's just go down the list here, get through it, and get into the preview. So, starting with Red Bull, big upgrade for them. There was some photos that came out recently, I think it was today. Rear of the car, they're getting a nice upgrade there. Rear of the car looks kind of behind the side pods. It's going to improve the airflow to the rear wing. A lot of people noticed it. Now, they haven't had the huge dip in the side pods that Ferrari had and some of those exotic designs. They've been more tame, but this kind of showed a bigger dip, kind of showed a more distinct airflow to the rear wing, so that's something to look for. Of course, Adrian Newey is always going to find a way to make that car faster, so no surprise there that Red Bull's still developing the car very well, and exciting to see what that brings for them. Obviously, they don't need a lot of help at the moment. They're at the front, but we'll see what they have and see how much better it makes them. Ferrari now, we touched on this in the Canadian Grand Prix podcast, the review podcast. Carlos Sainz is now going to get the new rear wing that Ferrari had brought for Charles Leclerc in Montreal. So let's see how that affects the cars. Now, Leclerc, it was still a little hard for him to pass in Montreal, so it wasn't the best, but might have helped Carlos Sainz out. Maybe could have used that to try to get past Max Verstappen for the win. So both those drivers are going to have that now. That should be a big upgrade for them. They've also run really well at Silverstone. As I mentioned, Charles Leclerc has 2 P3s and a P2 in his last 3 appearances at Silverstone. Obviously, the P2 last year, getting passed by Lewis Hamilton in the dying laps of the race. They haven't had the best car the last few years, but Charles Leclerc still just finds a way to do good things at Silverstone. So, interesting to see now where they have arguably the best car, first or second. What can he do? Can he go out and win the race? It seems to be a track that Ferrari's always favored at. He has a fresh engine as well. He brought that up in the press conferences today, and let's see what he can do. I'm really interested to see. It's something has to give here because Max Verstappen is going to run away with this championship soon. And as much as we want Ferrari and maybe Mercedes, which we'll touch on in just a second, to kind of ramp things up, something's got to give here. Max Verstappen is in peak form. Red Bull are in peak form. And if Ferrari and Mercedes don't do something soon, it's going to be a walk in the park for Max Verstappen. So let's see what Ferrari has. Moving on to Mercedes. This is the most anticipated one, right? We've been talking about Mercedes all year. When are they going to finally turn things around? We've been waiting and waiting. This is the race. No, this is the race. And they've shown signs, but they really haven't gotten to the spot that they've been in previous years where they're just at the top. They're at the peak. You know, they're fighting for wins every weekend and often favored for wins. This is going to be probably the biggest upgrade they're going to make all season. It's been rumored maybe about 2/10 worth of time now. That might not get them up to where they need to be for Ferrari and Red Bull, but it gets them a lot closer. It kind of separates them from that mid-pack, which they've started to do here in recent races. They're not hanging around with the McLarens and the Alpines. They're just on their own, and that's what you want to see if you're Mercedes. Now they have to make that extra step and get closer to the Ferraris and Red Bulls, and we'll see if that helps them do that this weekend. And they've also mentioned, and James Allison's talked a lot, he seems giddy in interviews where he's like, I don't want to get too excited, but we put a lot into this, and, I think it's going to be a good weekend for us. They mentioned the smooth surface at Silverstone. We've got a lot of street tracks, a lot of bumpy surfaces. Very smooth surface at Silverstone, similar to Barcelona, which they ran really well at. Lewis Hamilton fought back from the back of the field. George Russell, I believe, had a podium in that race. They might be in for a pretty sharp performance. We're going to find out here pretty soon in the next couple of days. I think, it's going to be hard for them to get up, with the Red Bulls and the Ferraris, just because they have been like a second ahead at times, it feels like, this year. So they've been so far ahead. I don't want Mercedes out there running their own race just in P5 and 6, just kind of chilling out there forever. And 30 seconds behind the Red Bulls and Ferraris and 30 seconds ahead of everybody else. I want them to get up a little closer here, throw a wrench in this title fight a little bit, see if they can make some noise. So I'm excited to see what they have. They've been really talking this up for a long time. Anticipation is built. Seems like with the P3, P4 at Canada last time out, Lewis Hamilton getting that podium, it was the huge thing. Hamilton finally got his podium after George Russell had been super consistent and got a bunch this year. It seems like things are on the upward trajectory for Mercedes, and let's see what they got. It's time for the rubber to meet the road. Let's see what you got. How much of the upgrades actually mattered. So going from a team that is on the uppity up, and looking good with the upgrades, let's go to McLaren here. Now they have, it seems, some upgrades planned. Lando Norris had alluded to, there's something in the pipeline for Silverstone. We're going to have something, try to reduce the drag in that car, probably the draggiest car on the grid, no straight line speed. But it did come out today that budget cap issues are putting, quote, a handbrake on the upgrades for McLaren. So that's going to be interesting to see how big these upgrades are going to be. Andrea Seidel was mentioning, they really have to use their wind tunnel time very wisely. Can't use too much of it, and it seems like they're really struggling with the budget cap this year. And obviously with McLaren, where they want to be, they want a major upgrade. They need a major upgrade to kind of fight back to the front, but it just doesn't seem like the budget's there for them at the moment. So that's going to be interesting to watch and see, are these upgrades going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? Because moving on to Alpine here, Esteban Ocon, he brought up a good point. He was saying, as Alpine's bringing their own upgrades for this weekend, they had redesigned side pods, a new floor, kind of similar to the Ferrari. That was kind of, I guess, the direction they were going. Ocon says he's optimistic, but he said, hey, I'm really curious to see what the other teams bring because, yeah, we're confident in our upgrades, and so we know it's going to make us better. But relative to the other teams, how much better did they get? I think that's the big thing for McLaren is, yeah, they might bring some upgrades, but if Alpine's seemingly more major upgrades are better than them, they're going to get jumped in this championship really quickly. And McLaren are holding on to P4 right now, but with the straight line speed of the Alpine, it's going to be hard to get by them. And, man, it seems like the midfield can kind of swap here a little bit. It seems like Alpine are kind of on a more upward trajectory than McLaren. And look, McLaren, they've had some good results this year. They had the Lando Norris podium in Imola. They have an 8-time Grand Prix winner in Daniel Ricciardo. They have the ability to go fix this, but at the end of the day, if the car's not there, nothing can happen. And it's insane because a lot of the reason that they won, or probably the main reason they won in Monza last year, and the 1-2, was because they had a rocket in the straights. Their car was the least draggy car. They had the best engine in the Mercedes engine, and they were just flying down the track. And you flip to a year later, and they've just totally not been able to get on top of these regulations. So it just goes to show how hard it is to keep up in Formula One, year on year, especially when there's new regulations and how much that can mix up the grid. And McLaren just haven't been able to find it this year. So we'll see what they have. Obviously, again, Alpine bringing the big upgrades. And again, another team to mention, Alfa Romeo. They said they're struggling with spare parts. They said they don't even know if they're going to have enough spare parts in Silverstone to make it. Now, I think they ended up coming out and saying, we think we're going to be fine. We're going to have enough. But that's the reality in 2022 in Formula One with the budget cap issues and all this. And you, especially if you've had issues earlier in the year with incidents and crashes and losing front wings and etc., it can get difficult to find these spare parts. I mean, obviously there's a budget cap now, so every team's in the same boat. And we saw even last year, I believe it was the French GP, where Verstappen ran over the curb, or maybe it was Checo. One of the drivers ran over the curb, and the race engineer said, hey, Michael Massey, the race director at the time, said, can we get that part back? We need that part because we don't have enough money to go make a whole new one. We got to repair that one. So it just goes to show that these budget caps are they're really kicking in for every team. And, you look at a team like Red Bull where they've had a lot of internal issues. They've had a lot of reliability issues, so that could affect them there. They've, thankfully, for their case, not had a lot of on-track incidents in terms of crashing and damaging bodywork. So it just goes to show, all these teams are kind of in different boats. And especially when you get to a team like Haas, like Mick Schumacher crashing, I believe I saw over $3 million in damage he's already caused. So if you're a team like Haas, how much can you spend on upgrades in reality when your drivers are crashing the car all the time, or their one driver's crashing the car all the time? So it's a really interesting challenge to see how these teams deal with the budget cap. And some teams are just already in a hole, whereas others who have maybe been more reliable or haven't gotten into as many incidents can say, hey, we have room for one or two more major upgrades. Where you look at McLaren and Alpha and they're like, we can barely bring spare parts, let alone upgrade the car. So it's really interesting to look at that. And as I get to the last couple teams here, two of the Mercedes engine cars, Aston Martin and Williams, both bringing upgrades. Now, Lance Stroll mentioned an upgrade, wasn't really specific on what it was going to be. He said they're looking forward to a big upgrade. That was the big quote when he talked to Lawrence Barretto today. He said, yeah, we're just looking forward to, a big upgrade. So we'll see what that is. Now, Williams, they were a lot more confident in their upgrade. Alex Albon's going to be the one with the upgrade this weekend. Goes to show you, Nicholas Latifi's been with the team 3 years now, and he's not even considered the first driver on the team. It's Alex Albon. So Albon's going to get the upgrade. They said it's a big upgrade. A sizable difference was the quote. And they said it's going to make the car look quite different. And both the drivers seem extremely excited about it. Hopefully can vault them up into, I wouldn't even say they're in the midfield right now, vault them into the midfield. And, see if they can get some good results. And there might be rain in the forecast they mentioned. So they said that would kind of dampen the upgrades, the optimism around the upgrades, because you just wouldn't be able to test it out and really see how good they actually are. But I think it's good for Williams. You want to see them back at the front. Obviously, we like to clown on Latifi, and it's fun to make fun of him, but maybe give him a little bit better of a car, and you see what he's got. He did score points a couple of times last year before George Russell even did. So, hey, we'll see what they got. You'd like to see them, at the most, just fighting with the likes of Aston and Haas and Alfa Romeo, just kind of up there in that 6th or 7th spot. I don't think anyone wants to see, oh, here's the top 2 teams, and then here's the next 5 or 6, and then here's the bottom 2. No, we want... Yeah, there might be the top 2 teams, but ideally you'd want all the rest to be next to each other. Okay, maybe Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes even now, maybe they're the top 3 and they're fighting for wins, but I want it to be where I don't know who's going to be P5 and P6 every weekend. Maybe it's a McLaren, maybe it's an Alpine, maybe it's a Haas. That's the fun part, is not knowing, hey, who's going to pick up the scraps if top 2 drivers crash? Who's going to pick up that P3? Is it going to be an Aston this weekend or a Haas? That's the fun part, and that's not where we are right now. And I think that's the dream of where we want to get, right? We want to get to a spot where everyone is somewhat equal, and we can say, hey, this midfield can be mixed up every week. Maybe this week McLaren qualifies P9, P10, and then they're P5, P6, and or down in P17. That's what you want to see, that variability. Maybe if you're not a fan of some of these teams and drivers in the lower order, you want your team to be P4, sitting up there nice and pretty. But for the casual fan and then mostly neutral fan, which I am, I just want to see good racing at the end of the day. That's what we want. We want the cars to be all over the place. We want the jumbled order. That's what makes these wet races so fun, and the wet qualifying that we had in Canada. We had Haas P5, P6 out of nowhere, and, guys trying different strategies and all this stuff. And it really mixed up the race, and it was really fun to see. And that's a dream. So hopefully we get there. Don't know what the weather's going to be like in Silverstone. Might be some rain, might not. Don't honestly need the rain in Silverstone. It's such a good track to provide great racing that, hopefully we can get some good stuff for the entire race. And in previous years, like I just saw the clip of the first lap of Hamilton and Verstappen from last year and the crash and all that. The racing was so good between those two on that first lap up until the crash that they were so close. And you think back to previous years at Silverstone where the cars, with the 2021 and before the turbo hybrid regulations, they weren't able to follow that well. Well, now with these cars, hopefully they can just keep on following each other the whole time. And Silverstone has so many unique corners that offer you a chance to get one overtake and then get it right back, whether it's Village or whether it's Woodcut down there or Luffields, all those different, every corner's got a name at Silverstone, it's just funny, but all those different corners where it's not like other corners where, okay, you have the DRS, you go into a hairpin, you make the overtake, and you go. No, it's not like that. I'll overtake him here on this corner, but then I'll set myself up in the next corner, and it's just a battle all the way down. We've seen so many good battles at Silverstone over the years, including with Leclerc and Verstappen in 2019, so that should be a fun one to watch. Hopefully they can stay together the entire race because we know they have history there. But yeah, Silverstone is a good track on its own. It had the sprint race last year. Didn't provide the best racing. I would like to see it with the new regulations personally. Now, I know the new regulations, I don't know. For me personally, they haven't super lived up to what I expected. I was expecting much, closer racing. They are racing closer, but the overtaking has been more difficult. And you would have hoped that the budget cap would have compressed. Oh, or touched the mic there. You would hope that the budget cap compressed the field a little bit and made it so that teams would just genuinely run closer, even if overtaking or following wasn't as easy. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's a good race. I'm pretty confident it's going to be a good race from the front, midfield, all the way to the back with the upgrades teams are bringing, where they are currently in the standings, and kind of how close they are. So really looking forward to that. And as far as predictions go, man, I was really thinking about this. I think everybody would love to see Mercedes get back. And given that they have two British drivers, Lewis Hamilton on the podium or getting a win, or Russell getting a win, would be such an awesome moment, kind of triumphantly making their statement that they're back. Both of them having a good result. I don't know if we're going to see it. I want to see it personally. I think it would be awesome. It just seems like until we see Red Bull falter consistently, you have to go with them, right? And they've had moments earlier in the season with the reliability, but the last 6 races, man, they have just been dominating. 5 wins for Max, 1 win for Checo. Ferrari's been the one on the back foot, and it looks like until we see otherwise, this is Red Bull's race to lose. I'm going to go Verstappen with the win, Leclerc P2, and I'll go Sainz P3. I think they both have a good weekend, maybe with that new rear wing upgrade. Checo maybe falls back a little bit, kind of on a downswing after he was so close early in the championship. Had the moment in Canada where he kind of fell down a little bit in the standings because of the crash. I'm going to go Verstappen P1, Leclerc P2, Sainz P3. And I think if you're Ferrari, you take that. You had no points in Baku. You had one driver starting from the back in Leclerc who didn't get the maximum amount of points. You had Sainz P2, but that's all you can ask for Ferrari. And you hope that on specific circuits, Silverstone is one of the circuits suits Ferrari, but Red Bull has won there recently. Max Verstappen won the 70th anniversary Grand Prix in 2020, the second race that they had there. But yeah, I just think Red Bull right now are just a cut above everybody else. I think there's a little bit above Ferrari, and I like Ferrari's upgrades that they're bringing. I like the idea of removing drag from the car, but you're going up against Adrian Newey, and how do you go against Adrian Newey? The guy's a mastermind, so it's going to be tough for Ferrari, I think, to kind of wedge their way back. I sure hope they do it, and you know, with the way Charles Leclerc has performed in qualifying this year, it would be no shock if he starts the race P1 because he has been so fast over one lap. He's extracted every ounce of performance out of that car, and you can't be shocked if he gets P1. It's just, can he maintain that? Obviously, Silverstone, every year, it's so hot. The tire temps are always a critical thing. We saw in 2020 with Lewis Hamilton and Bottas and Sainz. Everyone's tire was blowing up, so we're going to have the 3 hardest compounds of Pirelli tire to help combat that. But even then, it's just so hard to maintain those tires. So likely if we get a hot race, probably a 2-stop, which is good. We always love more variability in the pit stops there and the strategy, so that's good. But yeah, we'll see what Sunday brings. We'll see how the teams are able to strategize there. And again, I brought up that Lewis Hamilton race, and just shout out to David Croft on that call. You know, as an announcer myself, I certainly understand how hard it is in the moment to kind of process those things and to analyze it, spit out what you're trying to say, and do it in an entertaining and informative way. It's very hard to do that live in the moment. And watching that call back by David Croft, just excellent. Between, okay, Lewis Hamilton's tire's out. We know where he is on the track. Let's see where Max is. Constantly updating the audience on, you know, where the two are, you know, what the deal is. And of course, just making the great call at the end with the race win. So that's why he's the best. Just a quick shout out to him. Not that he needed one from little old me, but yeah, excellent call. And hopefully we get some more good calls there for this year's race at Silverstone. So with that being said, yep, I'm going to go with Max Verstappen P1, Charles Leclerc P2, Carlos Sainz P3. That's my official prediction for the race. And I think Leclerc's going to get pole. I think he puts it together with the fresh engine, the new rear wing. I think he's able to get pole over one lap. I just trust Red Bull a little more in the race. I trust Max to have the race pace to get it done. And maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. It would certainly add some more fuel to this championship, a little spice to it, you know, add some interest into it with Leclerc kind of climbing back over to Max. But we'll see how it goes. And yeah, so I'll leave it there for the preview. And as I mentioned, I did want to talk about some of the issues that have gone on in F1 this year. Now, or this week rather. It's nothing new that racism is alive and well in our world, and it sucks because you see it all the time. And you saw it with Lewis Hamilton last year when he crashed out Max Verstappen. Instantly, he gets the racist comments online, he gets the death threats, he gets, everything from A to Z. And Lewis Hamilton, even the year before 2020, was such a huge advocate, and it was so appreciated for his advocacy for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and all these things going on. He made very clear he was, he wore the shirts honoring them, knelt at every race, put his money where his mouth was. He did everything he could advocacy-wise during the season and during the pandemic and all this to do what he could to help. And now we're at a place again where we've had two incidents this year. I keep saying this year, this week. It sucks to say this week. It happens so frequently. First one, Yuri Vips, F2 driver in the Red Bull Junior Academy, live streaming on Twitch with some of his other Red Bull Junior members, including Liam Lawson, playing Warzone, I believe. Straight up just says the N-word on stream after he gets killed. And the way he said it was a way that it came out so clearly that this was not the first time he said that. This is something that is in his vocabulary, and it is used very often by him. And it sucked also to see, though he didn't say anything, Liam Lawson and some of the other guys just kind of laughing it off. And I get it's an awkward situation and whatever, you're live, but you got to call that out when you see it. I mean, that's not some word. He's not calling him stupid. He's calling him probably the worst word in the English language, the N-word. I mean, I can't even say the word. That's how bad it is. So just disappointing all around. Of course, Yuri Vips was then dropped from the Red Bull Junior Academy. Still going to have his seat at High Tech for Formula 2 for the rest of the season. Don't know how I feel about that one. Obviously, money talks over everything. We know that in F1. We go to places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all these places that have human rights violations that F1 just does not seem to care about because money talks. They want the money at the end of the day. And it's a big problem the sport's facing. I think it's going to come to a head at some point. Drivers are not going to want to keep racing in places where you can't live and be yourself because it's against the law, whether it's your sexual orientation, your race, etc. These places are not sustainable, I don't think, to the future of Formula One and the direction that they want to go. And of course, the other huge incident, Nelson Piquet, the three-time, I believe, world champion, father-in-law of Max Verstappen, during a clip on Brazilian TV, I believe, or some podcast, he essentially called Lewis Hamilton the N-word, and people were, trying to defend it and say, this and that, and he said what he said. And I don't speak Portuguese, so I deferred to the people that did speak Portuguese, and they pretty much unanimously were like, yeah, he just straight up called him the N-word. That's what, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, Nelson Piquet, he needs to have his paddock pass removed. There's no other way to go about this, I don't think. You can't have that guy in the paddock with Lewis Hamilton, with these other drivers that obviously are uncomfortable by him. I don't care who his son-in-law is. I don't care who he is. You have to, at some point, put your foot down for F1. You can't just keep making these statements. I saw somebody share the statements that F1 had made the past 3 years about racial diversity and racism and all this stuff, and it's just so cookie cutter, and it just repeats itself every year because these things still happen. There are still racist people in the world, and F1 just puts out a statement, saves face, moves on, and that's all they're going to do, and they don't really want to address it at all. I saw Max play it off as well. I think he said it, obviously it's not correct, but he's not a racist. I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one, Max. It seemed pretty racist to me. Even Kelly Piquet liking a post kind of alluding to the fact someone in her family had mentioned that, we say that all the time. Well, I don't care if you say it all the time. It doesn't make it right. You're still racist for saying it. So, yeah, it's just so sad because obviously they're just targeting Lewis Hamilton because of his race. He's one of the biggest advocates in the sports world. Obviously I didn't get into F1 until the last few years, but just looking at some players like a LeBron James, for instance, who's done so much, who is an advocate for so many good causes, and it still gets all this hurled at him. Then you see Lewis Hamilton, the first black F1 driver and arguably the best F1 driver to ever live. He has gone through so much in his life, from his early days in karting, being the only black kid and the only black family there, to working his way up, really a grassroots effort to get him into racing. it should be a feel-good story for everybody. And he just still has to be subjected to this kind of abuse, and there's no place for it. F1 has the power to put their foot down and make a statement and make an example of these people, and they don't. Nelson Piquet should never be in an F1 race again. Simple as that. And look, that might not change the internal attitudes of racist people. Obviously, they're going to be racist if they're going to be racist. But outwardly, it would, I think, at least stop the abuse that some of these drivers face, and it would help protect them from some of that they don't need to be subject to, because there's nothing wrong with them. They are just human beings at the end of the day. And, you know, it's, and also as, you know, living in America too, you see this all the time. I can't even count how many times I've lived through an unarmed black man being shot, or black people in general in this country just being the face of racism, being racially abused for no reason at all other than the color of their skin. It's just so sad to see. And, you know, you watch sports to get away from some of the other stuff in the world. And when something as simple as driving a car around a track really fast can't be safe from that, it's just terrible. You know, Lewis Hamilton made a mistake. Yeah, he crashed with Max Verstappen. Oh, well, he didn't intentionally ram his car into Max, and then, you know, once Max got out of the car, he didn't drive towards him and try to run him over or anything. It was a racing incident. Yeah, it sucked. Okay, he got a penalty for it. We moved on. It's so frustrating to see, and it can be bleak in these times to think, you know, I hope it gets better and stuff like that. But it's up to everybody, all of us, to call it out when we see it. It's up for those in power, especially those people like F1, these huge corporations, to finally put their foot down and do something about it, rather than just giving out empty statements. And I did see some of the statements some of the other drivers made. Like, I think Leclerc made a statement. Lando and George at least said something or liked something from Hamilton. And, you know, it's obviously great to see that support. You'd want to see a little more action. That's why I think a lot of people love Sebastian Vettel, where, yeah, some drivers will support it on social media, but Seb just straight up, you know, he'll support it with Lewis or whoever. You know, I love the moment in Hungary where he was wearing the shirt, and after the race they said, "Oh, what if they ban you and they take away your position?" He said, "I don't care." He's like, "Do it. What are you gonna do? It doesn't hurt me. I'm just gonna wear the shirt because that's what I believe in." So I think that's what we need more of in sports in general, in the world in general, but especially in F1 in terms of advocacy and calling these things out when we see them. It's so much of a, you know, I even saw stories being like, yeah, when you got back to the paddock, you know, and 10, 20 years ago, oh, these jokes were common. And it's just such an old school mentality that we need to kind of drive these older mentalities out and these older people out that have these mentalities from the sport, because it's just not sustainable. You know, you're a world championship. We race as one. We see at all the races. Do we? Do we race as one? I'm not so sure, because every time something like this happens, it seems like F1 wants to just save face with some kind of PR-generated statement and then move on, because that's money at the end of the day is all they care about. And we all know that. We know money's all they care about, but we choose to watch because it's fun. It's a sport. It's the peak of motorsports. And yeah, I would just love to see more action. To sum all of this up, I would just love to see more action from a lot of these big corporations. When you have a guy like Lewis Hamilton, and we saw it with Naomi Schiff even earlier, saying, you know, kind of questioning her credibility. Another black woman, former driver, should not have her credibility questioned. She's a literal motorsports professional. But it's just frustrating to see this. Lewis Hamilton doesn't deserve this. He is 15 years into his career now. He's a 7-time world championship. He has essentially every important record in Formula One. He does not have to prove himself to any person on this planet in terms of the type and the caliber of racing driver that he is. And he still has to face this. And I liked what he had mentioned on Twitter as well, saying, you know, we kind of have to drive out this mentality, and you know, it's not just language, it's kind of the meaning behind it. And yeah, hopefully you want to see things continue to get better. Have they gotten better in the world generally? I think they have, in terms of, you know, racism and sexism and homophobia and all that stuff. It's gotten better. It certainly has, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. It needs to be eradicated, not suppressed. So hopefully we can see some good things happen at the British Grand Prix to tie this all back to Formula One. I know it was a little tangent there. Hopefully we can see some good things from the drivers. I'd love to see them stand in support and stand in solidarity with Lewis, whether that's something on the grid or something that they do, whatever they do. I would just love to see a lot of support for Lewis, because obviously Lewis is, again, I just mentioned all his credibility. He has thick skin because he's dealt with this his entire life, unfortunately, so he knows how to deal with this and he knows what's up. But he shouldn't have to go through this. And hopefully, I loved his tweet as well, just someone mentioning, what if Lewis Hamilton just said, "Who the F is Nelson Piquet?" and just got off Twitter, and he said, "Imagine." And that's how Lewis Hamilton should be able to handle it, because who is Nelson Piquet to say anything? Some guy way back then who raced. It's like, who cares? And Nelson Piquet has said some abhorrent stuff. If you look, don't have to look hard. Go on to Twitter, go on to social media. You'll find some stuff that he said in the past that isn't so great. So with that all being said, support Lewis Hamilton. Call out racism when you see it. F1, do something. Remove Nelson Piquet's paddock pass. To tie it back to Yuri Vips as well, I applaud Red Bull for their quick response and cutting him from the junior team. That was absolutely the right move. High tech, I don't think he should have his seat. I understand he's a good driver, but sometimes it doesn't matter how talented you are. You got to have a good head on your shoulders and be a good person. And I would have liked to seen him taken out of the Formula One, off the Formula 2 grid, I should say, taken off the Formula 2 grid this season. I thought that would have been a good move as well, but we'll take what we can get, I guess. So that's the preview. That's all my thoughts on the drama and the things that have happened in F1 this week. The preview for the Silverstone GP. Please, check me out on social media. All down here, linked to all my socials. Trying to be as active as I can on there, between this little passion project of mine, trying to find the time to be active. Probably going to be live tweeting the race on Sunday, so give that a quick shout. Follow me on socials. Have a chat with me. Would love to. I'm always down to talk to people. And with that being said, we will see you for the review of the Silverstone GP. Hopefully you have a good weekend. Enjoy the races. And hopefully your favorite driver wins, whoever that may be. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.